Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a quick rundown of Dev Diary 74, which is covering all the UX improvements that are starting to come into the game for patch 1.2. We've noticed a lot of these ourselves, reading through it. I also read some that I hadn't noticed when we were playing on the open beta, which you can opt into, and you have to opt into it by choice in order to be playing on it. So if you're not opted in, you can expect a buggier game, but also expect, a lot of features that make you not want to tear your hair out. If any of you are wondering why I'm bald, that's why. So let's get into it. This guy introduces himself and says he's the guy responsible. Okay, so one of the things they changed was the trade routes UX. You can now sort by a whole bunch of different filters. You can sort by goods, by country. You can do yours or everyone in the market or other people and all these sorts of stuff. You can see here, you're seeing a whole bunch of these features. And in particular, being able to sort by country seems pretty good because when you're trying to get someone into your customs union, you really want to do a large volume of trade with them. Being able to see this is very, very nice. And also just, if you're thinking about who you want trade agreements with, who you want embargo, although embargo is kind of a weak mechanic, this is one way to go about it. And so this is a great improvement. There's also a highlights tab, which is where they moved the goods that are good for export and goods that are good for import, section. They moved that into the highlights tab, which I believe is new. Not 100% sure on that. Message settings. So you can now decide which messages you want to get specific notifications for. I have not played around with this yet. I imagine it's something that's pretty nice. You can change whether it's a pop-up, toast, all these sorts of things. This is spectacular. Really nice that you can decide now, I really don't want to hear about the mass migration events. Once I know that they're starting to come in, I don't care about hearing them anymore. Just the first one. So I'm not sure exactly what I need to do to change that, but this is something you can do. All right. Parallel to adding message settings, we're also made a pass on making sure the notifications we post to the player are informative and have a reasonable default setting on how we present them. Cool. Among the tweaks we've done are make the interest activated, deactivated notification into you can now conduct diplomacy with X notification that only triggers if the activated, deactivated interest is the first one that overlaps with any of your interests. Great. So this should improve activate, deactivate. Currently, I don't think there's a notification or the notification for deactivate. I feel like I never see it, and sometimes I lose an interest, and then I don't know why. Let's see. Splitting up trade routes into significant and less significant versions. That's interesting. Okay. And then show mobilization, declare neutrality notifications only if you are committed in a diplomatic question. Oh. Thank you. Tired of having to declare neutrality just for the sheer purpose of avoiding getting all these notifications regarding it. Only show resource-related notifications if they happen in your market. This is great. I don't need to know that oil's been discovered someplace where I'm not. Generally speaking, if I'm interested in knowing if there's oil there, I can just click on it. These sorts of things. But these seem like small changes. All right. Let's scroll through it. Rebindable keys. Now you can rebind the keys. I didn't know you couldn't rebind the keys, but now you can. Generally, I'm not a hotkeys type of guy, not too heavily. But this is good. So the people who want to be really sweaty and reprogram all their keyboards to play perfectly, and not be a slow Andy like me, you can now rebind your keys. Pop needs. This is probably the biggest one, or how should I say? This is not the biggest one in terms of improvement for people who already play this game a lot, but it's the biggest one, I think, for making the game more accessible to other people, and that is the population needs UX change, where now it shows you what their needs are, what the prices are, these types of things, and how much they're paying for it. I'm not sure exactly what the 79% means, or the 82%. This might be they're getting this amount of their needs, or they're paying this amount on their needs overall. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's they're getting this amount of their needs. Something like this. They are struggling a little, so they're not up in there. I guess I have to hover over when I look through the UI, but that you can tell what your pops are consuming. Like here we see you're consuming 26% grain is 26% of your expenditures on grain. And so you know how to decrease, how to improve the standard of living in your market without having to improve wages. Because there's kind of two ways to improve standard of living, right? Or this is a good way to think about it. You can increase wages of the people to increase standard of living. So just increasing throughput bonuses will increase increase the equilibrium highest wage that can be paid in a building. So this will make it so that they will just keep increasing the wages until they get the employment, which drives migration, et cetera, et cetera. So just increasing wages will increase standard of living, but also standard of living is a function of wage times whatever the modifier is for the market costs of the goods for the needs. And so being able to access like what the percentage cost will help, because it's wages multiplied by modifiers. So if your pops are paying, an extra 5%, or if they're paying 105% of good costs, your standard of living will be lower. If they're paying 90% of good costs, your standard of living will be higher, even if the wage doesn't match that. Although you can kind of just think of it, standard of living as wages for the most part. Or this is useful with the understanding that you still have to be attentive to, consumer goods, this type of stuff. In addition to creating this panel, we've expanded more information of the pop lists used throughout the game and improved a few of the pop needs tooltips. They should now be on the surface more relevant, highly information up high in the information hierarchy. They pay an average of blah, blah, blah. Their largest expenses, fantastic. It tells you what their largest expenses are and also how much they are spending in it. Okay. So let's get into another one. Economy. Martin has already discussed some of the changes regarding construction in Dev Diary 71. Construction is a whole lot different now. I won't go through like all of it, but there are separate queues for both private and public construction. You control the public construction queue. The private construction queue is controlled by the AI. And in addition to these changes, we've improved the user experience of the gameplay loop by providing better contextual information in several places. For example, we have added infrastructure, available labor, qualification to the map list that is shown when expanding buildings. In the screenshot, you should also be able to see restructured layout of the map, interaction panel to make it possible to navigate directly to another panel, which is not the case in the construction interaction in the buildings panel, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the biggest thing, I think, is that or actually, I should read this a little bit more closely. In which case, the construction interaction... This layout allows for more reasonable tooltip positioning, making it easier to navigate the nested tooltip without accidentally opening another tooltip. Oh, got it. Okay, so it's just kind of like UX. This one's really, really big for me, though. Now it's sourced by labor. And labor is peasants plus unemployed, which is fantastic. It also has the check mark, which is like qualifications or no, if I'm not mistaken. And so often you would get to this point where you had already expunged all the peasants, but you had a ton of unemployment, right? And so you wanted to build where there was unemployment, and you had no good way of figuring out what the unemployment was, or there was a way, but it just wasn't very good. Now you can do it. So perfect. The most recent improvement made to the game, and was not aware of this when I was playing, is the reset production methods map interaction, a PDX project or PDT project by our lead designer Mikhail and myself. Okay. It should make it much more efficient to streamline your production in your country, which is especially useful if you've just acquired a bunch of new states. This is somewhat of a work in progress, and we are hoping to expand. So this maybe is not in the 1.2 beta that's currently live. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. I haven't tested it. But this is fantastic because, one of the most annoying things is conquering a bunch of new territory, and then you're like, well, I got to go through all of my freaking PMs now, and try and make sure everything's all kosher. And now you can just click a button. It looks like it's a little bit easier. I wish it was just a box you could tick where it would just say all new territories adopt these PMs. This seems like considerably better than still having to click the button, but just clicking one button instead of having to swap the PMs over of everything seems much, 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 much better. Okay. One of the most popular, especially because you would have to go through like the urban buildings, you would have to go through you'd have to go through urban buildings, you would have to go through rural buildings, you would also have to go through like like your railroads and your ports, and also your military buildings, all of this just to make sure the PMs are correct, which is kind of a lot to do. Okay, but now apparently you can click button to make it go faster. All right. One of the most popular mods in the game currently is Visual Methods by Fun, a mod we like so much we decided to make our own slightly tweaked version of. Copyright infringement. No. So what it does is it just has the UI much better in terms of telling you what exactly the change is going to be and makes everything more transparent. And this is fantastic. You see we have inputs, outputs, and also employed pops. So, pulp pressing 450 laborers, or 4.5k laborers, and we 30 wood into 40 paper. Now we see if we add 10 sulfur, we can make it into 70 paper instead, but we do have to swap some of those laborers over to, I believe that's machinists, and I believe the compass is engineers down here. But the idea is it makes it very much more transparent in terms of like what pops you're employing, what your outputs look like, what the changes are, these sorts of things. And this seems like a pretty big deal, especially when you are trying to, eventually when you're clicking fast, this should be fine and it's not a big deal, but this is so important for like newer players and stuff like this. One of my criticisms of the game and why I've not recommended this game to any of my friends is the UI is too opaque. And so you have to spend a ton of time like just figuring out how things work. And once you know which PMs are good, you kind of know, but when you know, but it's this is so much better. Okay, the investment pool is now being more prominently displayed in the buildings panel. I haven't noticed this, but I will take a look at it next time I play. But that it is changing the investment. I'm guessing this is in the overall, like the sidebar buildings panel, and not the regional state buildings. But that it is showing the expansion of the investment pool. Fantastic, as far as I know. A new tooltip for market access has been improved to give detail as why a state is not fully connected to the market. This is fantastic. Big happy on this. Radicals and loyalists. I noticed this one. It now shows you a much better breakdown of radicals and loyalists by like interest groups and professions and this sort of stuff, so that you can make better decisions on terms of like how you are trying to make them happy and this sort of thing. Also, I believe that the tooltips are a little bit better when you're actually looking at the interest group, although I don't know exactly what they're trying to show us here. It just says information's been exposed. Okay. Exposed. Convoys. Now at the top, it shows you how many convoys you have and what you're using them for. This is fantastic. It was like really annoying the way you had to go in order to access and look at convoys, and when you weren't sure something was messing up your market because convoys or something else, it was really annoying to have to go and seek out that information. And so now it's much more readily available at the top of the screen and just kind of lets you know, as well as lets you know in a very transparent way, why like your troops might just be getting shellacked because you don't actually have enough convoys for supply routes and this sort of stuff. And yeah, it's just much better. They added a couple map modes. They added 3 new map modes: literacy, population, and infamy. I don't recall hovering over for the literacy one, but the population one's a banger. And infamy, I haven't looked at that one yet, but that'll be a little bit interesting, I suppose, if you hover over infamy to look at it. And it also made the transition smoother. Not something I particularly care about, but I guess it's nice. For diplomacy, now it will show you, and this is so nice, who accepts. You can sort by acceptance, I think, by looking at this. And also it shows you who would need an obligation in order to accept. And this is fantastic. Being able to see if someone would accept and this is also when you're just conducting diplomacy. I think that they don't show it here, but just when you're conducting diplomacy as well, it shows you if they would accept with an obligation. This is much more transparent. It decreases the amount of clicks you have to make by a nice amount. And it also decreases you having to, click invite to customs union, move your mouse over, hover, read it, be like, okay, that's less than minus 50, so I won't be able to do it with an obligation. And now you just get it in a much more expedient way. So this is very, very, very nice. And the information that you can sort, it looks like you can sort by this as well. Because it looks like you can sort by cost or by acceptance or this sort of stuff. This is fantastic as far as making it much better. We have exposed all the types of diplomatic plays on country panel, not only the ones you currently start, making it easier to figure out what's blocking you from any particular play. Fantastic. Sometimes you're like trying to start a war, you don't know why. I think actually... Yeah. So, I just got used to it eventually at some point because I knew all the reasons that would brick wars. But, you can't start a play, and you're like, oh, I don't know. And there's, no information on why you can't start a play. And it's like, oh, it's because you're already involved in a play. Which I think is stupid, and I don't like that they didn't change that. But, that you can't have 2 plays at once. But that's a different thing. Now, it's much more transparent. If I was playing, I would just think the game's, bugged to hell. If I was not familiar with it. Okay, when it comes to the military system, the focus on UX improvements for 1.2 has resolved. revolved around making it clearer for how the battle systems work. We approach this by exposing more data related to battles, as well as improving some sort of the tooltips, presenting breakdowns and calculations evolves. Some effort has also been made to decrease the amount of visual noise from multiple front makers. Is that front or font? Okay, front makers. Okay, fair enough. This looks relatively clean, although this is not something like... I do not spend too much time just like looking at the battles. I just like look at the map, and then if the map's not painting the way I like, I just go, "Roar, what's wrong?" And then I look at the stuff, but I don't watch it too much in general, but this does seem to be an improvement. I don't know. I can't put my finger on why that, so let's continue on. The battles is less... I spend less time looking at battles than I do eco. You just need a bigger stick. You don't need to micromanage... Yeah. My philosophy for war is just have a much bigger stick so that this stuff doesn't matter. But let's continue. Work in progress tooltip for the breakdown of the initial number of troops. Each general was able to bring to the battle. This is interesting. I'm not sure if this is live. But this means multiple generals can bring troops to the battle, or are they talking about generals as in left versus right, not multiple on the left? But in any case, more transparency is nice. A lot of times it's like, it's not very clear who's winning the battle, and then you have the plus and the minus thing, which doesn't relate to the likelihood of winning the battle, just like how many people you have at the front and how quickly you push the front or get pushed on the front. So like if you're landing someone like China, you can have a minus on the front, and then you are just absolutely rolling them because your PMs are better, but you have a minus because they have more troops. And so I don't think that's... I think that the information could be conveyed in a much better way. We have also improved surface information regarding which HQ a commander considers their home HQ. Thank God. So, like, you used to have to hover through, like, 3 things or click on the 3 menus just to find out who's from which HQ, and, like, this sort of thing, which is, like, really just, like, you wanted to... like, when you had extra troops, like, in a HQ that were in reserve, you would want to promote someone from a specific HQ, but it would be very hard to tell who's from which HQ once they're already assigned to fronts. And so this was like really frustrating, and you used to have to go through like several like nested pieces of information to figure out what you want. But now if they're making it much better to be able to see where they're from, this is fantastic. Big love it. Okay. And then this amphibious landing, I guess, is a little bit better. Okay. Outliner. The outliner has gotten some polish, with pinnable goods and non-military characters being the biggest additions. Interest groups are now showing the approval value, blah, 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 blah. So one thing I do not like about this is you can pin politicians now. If you have a politician that's also a general, and you have your generals pinned, it automatically pins the politicians as politicians, which I would rather just not have there, but that's how it is. That's unfortunate. But knowing that you can pin staple goods, this is pretty neat. I haven't tried it yet. This might be something I do to pay more attention to this, because I think that this is a mechanic that's like really subtle, but you can increase migration a lot without needing to increase wages if you increase standard of living. It's also why I think getting really, really cheap services is probably in general a good look for the game, or in terms of gameplay. It's like, it's stronger than it seems, let's say. Okay, and then some closing words. In addition, tech tree improvements. Yeah, so they just say, tech tree improvements that we discussed in Dev Diary 70, and then they have no pictures for this? That's nuts. So the tech tree is now, okay, I think visually it looks a lot worse, but visually it's got a lot more information. It's much more information dense, and so overall I like the change, but aesthetically it's like, it sucks. But it now shows, like, a bunch of proper information just looking at it in regards to what all it does and what all it unlocks and these sorts of things. Seems much, much, much better for new players. This sort of stuff, they're coming a long way. I probably still wouldn't generally recommend the game to a friend, but I'm getting closer, especially because 1.2 is not live yet. It's live to the public beta, but it's not like live. Okay, closing words. In addition to all the changes listed above, there's a ton of other changes that are not UX and changes, by the way. These are just the UI changes. And so, in addition to the changes listed above, we have made over 100 smaller UX tweaks and bug fixes, perfect, which you will either have to wait for the full patch notes to explore or experience for yourself during the open beta. Once again, thanks to all the feedback, it really helps us make the game as great as it deserves to be. I don't know who rates their copy. Sometimes I just, like, come across sentences I regard as weird. I mean, like, so the semicolon is fine here. Or is that... Oh, I thought they had a semicolon. If it was a semicolon, it would be fine. Actually, I think... Without the semicolon, this is actually a grammatical error. I mean, this is... I'm not trying to dissect who writes their copy, but sometimes they're just like sentences that just strike me as very strange, and I can't help but notice and can't help but mention. Thanks for all the feedback. It really helps us make the game as great as it deserves to be. I guess the sentence is fine. I think that should be a semicolon though, but maybe I'm wrong. Big sad if I'm wrong. Okay, but yeah, the changes are very, very nice. So far, I'm really, really happy with patch 1.2. Very excited. Having a lot of fun playing it. Resisting the urge to play despite it's a lot of fun. I got other stuff I need to work on today, but so I wish I was playing more Victoria 3. Yeah, so feel free to try out the patch. Let's just... Yeah, in order to unlock it, I think you just right-click... your Victoria 3 and you go to manage and then, or I think properties. Yeah, you go into properties and then you go to betas and then you look into betas and it will say opt into patch 1.2, and so you could also roll back to a previous patch. Why you would do that is complete, I'm at a loss for, but you can put in patch 1.2 that way. I guess I probably should have figured that out at the start. And yeah, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm stuff, and have a good day.